All right. So the next story is yet another crisis in Canada. So, as you guys are well aware, we've been talking about various issues that this country of that we all live in, Canada, is facing. And we talk about the housing issue a lot because that's kind of maybe top of mind right now. But there's also maybe a stealth issue that's kind of creeping up that people are, I guess, aware of, but it's not nearly talked about as much as the housing issue, which is the healthcare issue. I would say that we have a healthcare issue in Canada, and many people from America or other places in the world, they might not know about this, and they might not they might not be aware of the gravity of the situation, and they might be like, hey, like, what do you have to complain about healthcare in Canada, because you guys have universal healthcare, and if you're coming from America, obviously you don't, right? It's like, what do you guys have to complain about? But I'm going to present some maybe disturbing statistics that may indicate that not all is well in paradise, which is that over 6 million Canadians are without a family doctor, and that represents about 22% of our population are without a family doctor. And this is in contrast to only about 8% of Americans who don't have health insurance. So, we complain a lot about, like, people in Canada kind of take it as a point of pride that we have universal healthcare, and America, you guys have to pay for healthcare insurance, and if you don't have insurance, you get slapped with like a $50,000 bill for a knee injury, and then you're done you're financially screwed for the rest of your life. Well, that is true. That is, like, it only affects 8% of Americans who don't have the healthcare insurance, right? I'm not saying that, because obviously America is a big populous country, and 8% is a lot of people. But what I'm saying is that, like, I'm not saying that we shouldn't do anything about that, like, as a society, as a civilization. But it's like, if you just look at it from a proportional standpoint, 22% of Canadians don't have a family doctor. I think that's, like, also a huge issue. And I'm just wondering, like, what you guys have in mind about this story. Like, do you guys feel that our healthcare system in Canada is adequate? And if not, like, how do we address this current issue? Do you think that this is a big issue, or is it being overplayed? Or yeah, it's just like, if it is a big issue, how would you kind of approach to fixing it if you were the government, or if you were prime minister or something like that? So I'm just curious to get your opinions on that, on this issue.
Yeah, no, for sure. Like, I'll just get this started here. I could definitely see it as being an issue for sure. I may have heard around that people are looking for family doctors, but obviously they're kind of struggling with that. And then, so in my head, there's like a few conclusions that I'm coming up with. First and foremost, I think it's just our immigration. I think there's so many people that are coming into Canada, and just because there's so many people in Canada or coming into Canada, they're obviously going to need family doctors. And with the surplus amount of people, there's only so many family doctors in existence. And so with all that people, you obviously can't help everyone. So what can you do? That's why maybe perhaps people are having a lot of issues with finding family doctors. And then my second thing too as well is, this is more of a theory. I don't know if this would be the case, but I guess a lot of people from the pandemic, or doctors specifically and nurses, are really burnt out, and maybe they possibly try to find a new profession outside of the medical field. Maybe it's not really their thing. And then on the caveat or other side too, becoming a doctor is like really expensive. There's a lot of medical debt with it. So maybe a lot of other people don't want to do it just because they could just be, an AI engineer or like a software engineer and do like much less school and make more money or something. And I think the last points, this is all just like speculation. I don't know if any of this is true. It could be, I'm not sure. But I think there's a lot of like immigrants coming in, but I think their papers aren't credible for like working in our medical field. So if there was more leniency, maybe as theoretical prime minister, I would like, double assess that. So like staffing in Canada in terms of our hospitals and medical fields can be a little more, like down. I mean, sorry, up, and rather than down, I guess. So I think that's what I would do.
Yeah, Tristan, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think Don is kind of on the right track with that, with the regards to, acknowledging credentials of immigrants, because if we're gonna be bringing in a ton of people who are highly skilled, highly you know our system encourages, like our immigration system encourages getting people like doctors, and which means that there probably are a lot of doctors who came to Canada who are not able to practice medicine. So there's definitely a lot of people who could be working as a doctor who are not currently working as a doctor. So if there was some efforts to acknowledge that, those credentials at a quicker rate, and verify that these people are adept enough to handle the task, that would be, I think, very beneficial. But yeah, I can definitely say that this is an ongoing problem. We've been struggling to swap our family doctor after our move. And I know for a fact that some of our friends who moved to Alberta were also struggling to find a family doctor. Um, so it's definitely pretty difficult to get one right now. There's just not enough doctors for the number of people, especially when a lot of people move to one area. So Calgary itself has gained some, like, I think it's like 100,000 people or so in the last few couple of years or more. And so that number of people um, is going to cause a lot of problems with having enough doctors. So that's a pretty big influx. But yeah, it's a problem. I'll say that it's still not nearly as bad as the 8% of Americans not having health insurance, because that's 24 million people or so in the States who don't have access to health insurance. That's a lot more. And to be clear, 6 million Canadians not having a family doctor. Yeah, not having a family doctor is a problem, but it's not as big a problem as not having health insurance. Because if I fall down the stairs and, hit my head, I can still go to the merge and be seen without paying a penny. Whereas if you don't have health insurance and you fall down the stairs in the States, well, do you go to the emerge and pay horrendous amounts of money, or do you just hope that you didn't get something that's going to kill you? You know, so I think that at the very least we don't have that kind of issue with like emergency kind of things, but it's definitely a problem for resolving stuff early, right? So, for example, like making sure if you get a regular checkup to ensure you don't have like cancer or something, right? It's definitely better to catch all of that kind of stuff early. And if you don't have a family doctor, it's a lot harder to catch that early. So
Yeah, it is a valid point that you brought up. And, maybe my counter to that is that, like, yeah, obviously 8% of Americans who don't have healthcare insurance, that's a huge problem. But besides the family doctor problem, that's not like the full extent even of our problems here in Canada with healthcare. It's also the wait times, right? So the wait times are like, I don't have the statistics in front of me, but it's like, I know it's significantly longer in Canada to like have to wait to get seen by a doctor, whether it's like a specialist or if like you had to go to the ER even. Like there's stories about how people have died waiting in the ER because they had a medical emergency, but it's just they had to wait for hours and hours, and they weren't being able, like a doctor wasn't able to see them in time, and then they died in the ER because the wait times are just so long, right? So there's like issues like that as well. And maybe just to like spice things up a bit, I know we're like we're known as like an anti-Trudeau show, so I'm just gonna like go ahead and ask this question: How much do you think this issue is Trudeau's fault? Right. So I want to be fair, right? So you guys know I'm not a big fan of Trudeau, but it's like I try to be fair, no matter if it's towards Trudeau or towards anyone else, right? So let me toss a question to you guys first before I impart my opinion. Is how much of this issue do you think Trudeau should take responsibility for, if at all?
I think there's like two specific reasons as to how it could be his fault. Like as I previously mentioned before, I think immigration's a little out of hand. So with so many people, of course, you're gonna have issues with finding family doctors. Like by theory, there might be like the same amount of family doctors, if not a little less, because of the pandemic, and just because of more people coming in, people are just gonna get unlucky and not find family doctors. And I think in an economic standpoint, maybe certain like policies could have been handled differently. Like the budget, in fact, did not balance itself. So because of the budget not balancing itself, it can butterfly effect into a lot of different situations.
Shots fired.
No, I want to stay as neutral as possible. I don't want to be anyway. Yeah, maybe because the budget did not, in fact, balance itself. Dang, it's not helping me. Anyway, that could be a part of the issue as to why things are the way they are now. So, anyways, yeah, I think that's what I think so far.
Yeah, Tristan, your thoughts?
Yeah, so I think that blaming Trudeau for this problem is not really it's not really his fault per se. You know, you can make the argument that there's high immigration results in, you know, less people, like less doctors per person. But I also feel like high immigration with the way our system works could be a benefit for family doctors in the sense of our immigration system does tend to be like doctor good, but for some reason it also goes, but doctor can't work as doctor. In which case it's like, why did we bother taking this doctor from a different country so that they can not be a doctor in Canada? And I feel like that's the big problem, that I think on that front. So it's difficult for me to say how much of the actual healthcare issue is Trudeau's fault and not just the system's fault. And I don't think that Trudeau has direct control of the credential evaluation of the new potential doctors that are immigrating into Canada. You know, like the federal government does control the immigration rate. So you could make the argument that if if they're not going to accept credentials very easily, maybe we should just not let in as many people so that our healthcare system can, you know, grow at a slower rate to keep up. But again, I don't think that this problem is in itself a particularly Trudeau specific issue. I think we would be having this problem with basically any other leader. And a big part of that is also just the fact that we are right beside America, which has much higher paid doctors than in Canada. So there is always going to be an inherent incentive for a Canadian doctor to leave Canada and go to the States because you can make literally like 5 or 6 times more money pretty comfortably just by jumping the border, right? Like anywhere from 2 to 5.
On that note, Tristan, can you speak to what you would do if you were the prime minister? Like, you know, what are some solutions that sound interesting to you that, you know, maybe we should explore, right? Because I know you just said that, like, you know, the prime minister doesn't have, you know, direct control over this because, you know, a lot of healthcare in Canada's on a provincial basis, right? But I think we've established that there are things that we can do on like a federal level as well, right? So if you were the top man in charge, what are some potential ideas that we should throw around? We don't have to like, you don't have to 100% guarantee that like this will work, but like, you know, just toss out some ideas, you know.
Yeah, so a few areas that you could do investments into. So one would be into investing into scholarships, etc., for students that go into medical studies in Canada, with a caveat on them that they have to stay within Canada for X number of years. Basically, you give them some sort of funding for their schooling so that they can now do their schooling without coming out with as much debt. But in exchange, they have to stay in Canada and work in the Canadian healthcare system for like a set amount of time, kind of similar to like how the military college has like, you get your schooling paid for, but in exchange, you now have to serve in the military for X number of years, right? So something to that effect, I feel like would be an area where we could invest it. And then in addition, like, as I said, kind of allowing some of these doctors from other countries to work, or if they aren't up to snuff, putting them through a program, investing in programs to get them up to speed with Canadian standards as quickly as possible. And then the other option, would be giving incentives for doctors to move to places that are where there's higher demand, rather than keeping doctors in places with lower demand. So giving them like a moving benefit. And then the other option is to invest more money into the healthcare system itself, so that the doctors here are higher paid and there's less of an incentive for them to leave the country and go to America. Because if you're looking at the difference between being compensated like 5 times as much, but say you're a doctor and you're uncomfortable with guns or something like that, if now you're getting paid like enough money that it's like only like a couple times more, maybe you'll be like, I'd rather feel safer. My peace of mind is worth this additional income that I could get from moving to the States, right? Or something to that effect. These are just kind of some things that I'm thinking about, but I'm not 100% certain if those would fix it, but those are just kind of the general thought process I'm following.
No, I think those are good ideas. And, I'm known as, I guess, the extremist on this show. It's like I take you guys' ideas and I like put it to the extreme, and that's like my idea. But I'm going to say maybe 2 things that are like number 1 is going to be controversial, and maybe number 2, not so much. But the controversial thing that I wanted to say, the solution to this problem, and I know that I'm probably going to get some pushback from the comments and maybe even from you guys. But I think it's a huge taboo in Canada to talk about having a private option for healthcare. But I think that this is a conversation that we necessarily need to have. Now, I'm not saying that we need to absolutely do a private option and that's the only solution to taking care of the healthcare issue. But I think that this is, again, a conversation that we should be having, right? So this is the theory on why it could work. So I'm not suggesting that we take away anybody's universal healthcare. It's like we have a public system, and that public system should stay. However, if somebody can afford to have a private option and to pay for healthcare to get seen faster, and to just be more assured that if they have an emergency that they can get seen faster, then I think that that'll provide an incentive to create like a separate system where it'll suck in money, right? And that'll increase the size of the pie for everyone, because there's now all of a sudden way more incentive to be a doctor, because you raise the average kind of pay that a doctor would take in, right? So it would create this like, it would create an extra boost to the industry and to the economy that is the healthcare service, right? So I think the issue right now is that we're focused on, like, again, we're focused on fighting over the scraps, right? Because we only have so many doctors, and there's clearly not enough doctors to go around, and we're fighting over, like, how do we allocate the current doctors we have to as many patients as we can? How do we overwork these guys as much as possible, and that's just not the solution, because like these are human beings. They have limits, right? Like you can only have so many patients at the same time. If you're a family doctor and you're taking care of like 20 patients, like your ability to take on the 21st patient is just going to decrease, no matter if you're like, no, even if you're like, you get like 4 hours of sleep per night, like you're still gonna like struggle, right? Eventually. So I think what we need to focus on is to increase the amount of total doctors in the first place. And how do we do that? Well, we do that by increasing the size of the pie for everyone. And I think having a private option would definitely help out with that. So that's like controversial opinion number one. I know that Tristan, you probably disagreed with everything I just said. I don't know about what you think of that, Dom, but I'll give you a chance to respond later. But point number two, maybe less controversial, is I think that we should do the opposite of what the Liberals suggested in the budget. So if you guys recall, what the budget said was that they're going to increase the capital gains tax they're going to increase the capital gains inclusion rate to 66%. So just in case you guys, like for audience members who don't know what that means, is that in Canada, capital gains is like a percentage of your capital gains that's added to your taxable income. So before it was 50% for everyone. Now it's going to be 66% for capital gains over $250,000. So the issue with this change is that a lot of doctors, they operate as small businesses, and they have capital gains. So these capital gains from these doctors who run family offices, they would not be exempt under the current rules of what the Liberals are proposing, and they would be charged the extra tax once that comes into effect. So I think this is a huge issue, because this further disincentivizes people to become doctors, right? Because it's like, I'm going to go to medical school for 10 years and then I'm going to still get hit with the extra tax because I'm all of a sudden considered rich. It's like, yes, doctors make a lot, but then they also have a ton of debt from medical school. And then, their work is also very difficult, right? So I think we could make an argument that doctors should actually be paid more than what they are already making, even though it's already like, above average what they're making. So what I think is that we should do the opposite. Instead of increasing taxes on doctors, we should make an exemption. And we should not only make an exemption, we should make an exemption such that they pay 0% capital gains tax. So if you're a doctor, then you don't pay capital gains tax at all, right? Like, isn't that such? Everyone else has to pay, like, has to do the 50% capital gains rate inclusion, or if you make over 250K, it's 66%. But if you're a doctor, it's just zero, like forever, always, right? Like, isn't that such a huge incentive that we should be thinking about, right? And I don't know. I think that's just another idea that I tossed out, and basically, like, it kind of ties into what I said earlier. It's like, how much of this is Trudeau's fault? Well, maybe the doctor shortage is not directly his fault, but a lot of the policies that he's pushed, especially recently, I think has made this issue worse. So I think he's indirectly responsible for this issue. But that's just my opinion. I know a lot of controversial stuff that I just said. Let me toss it to anyone who wants to speak.
I'm firmly against privatizing healthcare, and there's a multitude of different reasons for that. I'll just throw out a few of them because I don't want to spend too much time on this topic, because we've been here a while. But the big issue I see with privatizing healthcare, well, there's a few, but one of the big issues is the corruption of the incentives for privatized versus public healthcare, because by definition, if the healthcare is trying to, I guess maybe I might need to clarify a little bit on this. When you say privatizing, Andy, are you meaning like company, or like what's the funding structure? Like, who's funding
Yeah,
it?
so you would allow doctors to open their family offices and charge a subscription fee, or maybe even a one-time fee if you need to do walk-in appointments and stuff like that. When people when patients need to get healthcare, right? And a prescription fee model might work better because it's like it doesn't, their cost doesn't spike from month to month, and it's like an expected kind of fee. It's almost like healthcare insurance, but it'll be ideally a lot cheaper than what the Americans are paying for healthcare insurance, and it'll just go a little bit of an extra way to, just let like give more incentive, give more financial incentives to like these like small family offices that the doctors are running. So it's prescription fee model, or I guess doctors will be allowed to charge one-time fees as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so for just to start on that one, why would you ever not do that as a doctor? Why, like, what incentive do I have to be a public healthcare doctor rather than do that? Because obviously the financial gains from doing it that way would be way higher than the financial gains for working in the public sector, which to me kind of suggests that instead of making the pie bigger, you're actually just cannibalizing the public sector for your private sector that you've now created. In which case, instead of there being a bigger pie, there's now a pie that costs a lot of money to the end user, and a pie that can no longer sustain the rest of the users. Right. So that's kind of one of the big issues that I see with the kind of thought process with the privatized. And I just don't see there being a sufficient increase in people becoming a doctor regardless, because even if we do that section with the privatized, there's still going to be a lot more money to be made in the States than going that route. I would expect. So you're going to be losing your public doctors to that sector and America, in which case I feel like we're going to end up with even more of a shortage for the public side, which means that the public side gets worse, which means that the private side gets more people going to it, because they literally, there's no one at the public, like there's no one working at the public side, in which case now everyone is just paying more, because instead of paying for the instead of going to the public healthcare, which is, we've already provided the funding through our taxes for. And let's be clear, the taxes aren't going to come down even if the public healthcare becomes cheaper, right? Even if the cost of it is lower, the taxes aren't going to come down. I don't. It's like Loblaws. It's like people thinking Loblaws is going to lower their costs, like at the grocery store, because if we take off the carbon tax, like it's not going to happen. So I don't really see how we come out better in this scenario in that one.
So my counter to that is that like you can look at the lawyer system, right? So we have what's called public defenders, right? So this is the case in America and in Canada too, I believe, where if you can't afford a lawyer, then the Crown will assign you one. So we do have a public defender kind of industry where we have public lawyers for people who can't afford their private lawyers, but then we also have private lawyers, right? So imagine, I'm just thinking, if we did the lawyer system the same way that we do the healthcare system, where we forbid people to hire private lawyers, and we say that everyone has to have a public lawyer, a public defendant, then I think that it'll reduce the efficiency of our law system as well, right? Because it's already backed up, and then you can't hire like a lawyer, and then you might not get a public defender, and you have to wait to get a public defender, and it's just I think that we can look at the lawyer system for a potential solution to apply to our healthcare.
But do you not see how that would result in the rich it's basically another case of how the rich are now better off than everyone else? Because if I'm rich, I can afford the better doctor. And so I can just pay the money to get better service, just like in the lawyer system, where if I'm rich and you've got a public defender, I can afford to just pay for the best private guy there is, and the private guy will be better because the private guy is more highly compensated. So there's more incentive for you to be private. And I think in that regard, I don't really think that it's a good strategy to take our best doctors and give them an incentive to go and, you know, reap the most financial reward by going to the private sector, in which case now we have to compensate them directly for that service. Like, I think that it's like, I think they should be higher paid if they're the best doctors, but I don't think that it should be explicitly me going, I've got $5 million over this guy who's about to die, and I'm willing to drop that right now for my, I don't know, I'm going to jump the queue and I'm going to drop $500,000 to do it. And this other guy who needed the organ transplant 6 months ago, who's been in the queue, I'm just going to jump over him because I've got money. And I don't think that's right either. Right.
Yeah, I definitely see what you're talking about. And, you know, my response is, unfortunately, like, life isn't fair, right? We all know that, like, beautiful people get hired more easily at a job interview, right? And like rich people, they can afford more healthy food and they live longer. And there's a lot of these like kind of injustices. But from where I'm coming from, my point is just that it's kind of like almost like communism versus capitalism, right? It's like in capitalism, we have a bunch of rich people and then we have a bunch of poor people, and you can say that, hey, this looks really unfair. But in communism, it's just we commandeer the wealth of the rich and we distribute it to everyone, and then everyone's poor together, right? So I think that it comes down to a question of, is our current system, which is a public system, you're not allowed to have a private option, is that system working? And if it's not working, then that means that we're all getting bad healthcare together, right? So what I'm advocating for is maybe we could have some people get good healthcare and some people have the current healthcare, and then once we get the good healthcare to a certain portion of the population, then we can worry about improving the bad healthcare part. But if we continue down our current path, it's just everyone gets bad healthcare, right? And before you make a counter to that, let me just tell you an anecdotal story where one of the like former pastors of my parents' church, whom back then I attended many of his sermons, let's just say, he got colon cancer, and he just passed away a few weeks ago. So if I remember correctly, the full story is that, you know, between the time that he was diagnosed and between the time he passed away, and he was kind of young, by the way, he was only 65 when he passed away a few weeks ago. So between the time that he was diagnosed and between the time that you know he died, there was a period of time where the doctors were saying that, you know, like it wasn't like immediately diagnosed as terminal, right? Like there was a period of time where there was hope that something could have been done, and he needed, you know, like chemo and surgery and all this stuff. And there was like this like one surgery that he really needed, and he was put on a wait list for here in Canada, and the wait list times was just dragging on for too long. So eventually he decided to go to the States for the surgery. And when he went to the States, he was pretty much able to get the surgery pretty much right away. And unfortunately, in this case, it didn't really help him. But, you know, I can't help but wonder if like how many cases are like this where the being on the wait list here in Canada costs somebody their life, right? And the fact that, you know, like he was willing to pay, right? He had money. I think he ran a restaurant business before he became a pastor, and you know, he was willing to pay to get this surgery if a surgery can be had, but like the Canadian system literally would not allow it, and then he was forced to travel to the States, and you know, not to sound heartless, but you got to think of it from the economic standpoint, where like, you know, all that money that could have gone into the Canadian healthcare system like went into America, right? And I understand this is talking about human lives here, but it's economics and human lives are often intertwined, right? So this is just maybe you can argue, yeah, that's an anecdotal example, but this is a real life thing that happened. And yeah, I can't help but think that if the wait times for like surgeries and stuff here in Canada was shorter, how many lives would that save, right? So you're saying that it's unfair that rich people get to pay to skip the line and stuff, and I understand that. But I think it's also an injustice how long that we have to wait for important surgeries here in Canada. How many people die on the waiting list before ever getting the surgery, right? And if traveling to the States to get private healthcare, if let's say it wasn't an option, then like this would cost somebody their life. So yeah, I don't know. Dom, did you want to say something, or do you want to pass it to Tristan?
No, Tristan, go first. Go ahead. It's kind of like it's a crazy situation. Okay, go ahead.
I just want to like I'm sorry to hear about your pastor passing away, but I'll just say that I think it's clear to all of us here that there is a problem with the Canadian healthcare system. There's not enough doctors. There's not enough health going around. The wait times are too long. There is clearly an issue. So I don't want to like the fact that the wait time was so long that he had to go to America to try and speed up that wait time is a problem. That's clearly a problem. So I don't want to make it sound like I am ever once suggesting that Canada has its healthcare system figured out. That being said, in the past, we have had a healthcare system in which wait times were relatively low. You waited a bit, but you didn't wait that long. And you would get helped relatively quickly. And I would say that the majority of people were having a reasonable experience in the healthcare system. I would say that it has gotten a lot worse. So I think that the thing that we fundamentally disagree on is the solutions on how to fix that, because I think that the disagreement is the fact that I think that you view the privatized as a potential way to get out of this, whereas I kind of see the private system as a potential problem that introducing it would make it worse, right? And then with regards to the paying, like you make it worse in general, and then you have to pay more money. So I'm highly suspicious of privatized healthcare in general, and particularly because of the fact that the states, I would say as a whole, has a worse, maybe not like explicitly worse, because I don't think that their healthcare system is as overwhelmed as ours is, but I would say that as a cost to healthcare received, it's not a very good calculus, and so I don't think that the privatized solution is one that actually results in a better scenario for us in the end. I think that once you allow the privatization, it's really hard to claw that back into a public healthcare system again. Once you've resolved an overwhelmed healthcare scenario. So that's kind of where I think I'm pretty much going to leave it at.
Yeah, I mean, again, I won't go as far as to say that like the private option is the way to go, right? But all I'm saying is, like, it is taboo in Canada to talk about it, but my opinion is that it shouldn't be, and we should have a genuine debate, because if everything in the public system was good, then we wouldn't be talking about this and everything would be fine, right? And this wouldn't even be on the radar. But I think it's gotten bad to the point where we need to explore other options, right? And like, I understand what you're saying about it being kind of a Pandora's box where if you open it, you can't close it again. And I totally get that. But I think that like, is it time to break the glass and pull the emergency lever, even though it's not the most beautiful option that is available to us? That's kind of my question, right? I think that it is time, and that's my opinion, and I think that we should have a conversation about it. But yeah, Dom, some final thoughts. You haven't spoken in a while, so I wanted to give you a chance to speak before we round off this topic.
Yeah, no worries. So I think like from hearing both of you guys, like I may possibly be more biased towards like Tristan. I'll explain why. It's like you go to Canada's Wonderland or like Disneyland or Universal Studios. There's like the general line, and then there's like the skip the line, right? This is exactly it. I swear to God. So yeah, it'd be nice because like if you have the money, sure, go ahead, skip the line, like buy the skip the line ticket. It makes sense. But at the same time, for the people who can't really afford the skip the line ticket and who just choose to wait, I think with a lot of people choosing to go to the skip the line ticket and then continuing to do that, I think the person who's extremely poor has like a worse chance in the long run to get helped. So like the skip the line like ticket could be a good method at first, but like if it gets a little out of hand, then I think poor old like Detroit, Michigan person, it's kind of bad. I'm like profiling, but like they might get like the least amount of help possible in like the long run. Like that could be the theory. So I mean, while I get where Andy's coming from, I also get where Tristan's from. So like it might be better to skip the line setting altogether and just keep like the behemoth general line. You know what I mean? Like we're all
No,
from
but
so.
that's like a point that I was trying to make, right? So if skip the line wasn't, if pay to skip the line wasn't an option, then we all wait in the hot sun for like, an hour. But if we had the skip the line option, then at least the people who can afford it, at least they will get like the skip the line option, right? At least they will get on the ride faster. And like, yeah, sure, it sucks if you can't afford to skip the line and then like you're watching the people like get to skip the line in front of you and you're in the line still waiting in the hot sun. I understand that, right? It's like in a society, I think there will always be financial unequalness, right? Some people will be rich, some people will be poor, but it's just I'd rather have that than have everybody poor together, and that's kind of my point. But yeah. Anyways, Tristan, final thoughts. We got to wrap this up, or else
Yeah,
it's
I think it's better to just have more carts going around on the behemoth so that the line moves faster. So just saying.
no, I totally get that's the fundamental issue, right? It's just I think we maybe disagree a little on like how we exactly get there. As I've always advocated, the first solution, the best solution is just to increase the size of the pie for everyone, right? If you have a bunch of people waiting in the line at an amusement park, maybe the best solution is just to build more rides, right? Then the lines reduce for everybody, and even if you don't pay for the fast lane, then the line will be shorter. But it's just how do we get there, right? In the amusement park solution, it's like, how do we generate more income for the amusement park so that they would be willing to invest more in building more rides, right? So it's kind of like that idea, and maybe having a fast lane will give them more money, and then they will be more willing to build more rides. So it's kind of that, like the capitalist solution, and I know that like might be triggering for some people, but that's just my opinion.